Hello wrestling fans and welcome back to Spoiler Warning with myself, your host, Tom Colohue. Today we are going to go quite in depth with the latest news surrounding Sasha Banks and Naomi as they essentially walked out of WWE Raw. They were initially booked for Smackdown, but neither of them appear to be there. So there is plenty of news to discuss there. We will also be going into a little more detail as to true or false, considering the amount of news that has come out over the last few days. What's true, what's false, what's already been disproven, and the like. So to start with, if you haven't checked out the two previous videos about this, these were not live, they were 5-6 minute videos detailing the situation. Some of the information is in there, but to recap, Sasha Banks and Naomi walked out of this week's WWE Raw, handing over and thus vacating the Women's Tag Team Championships in the process. By doing so, they essentially walked out of the WWE in a time when rumour has it their contracts are expiring. Now, to be clear, Sasha Banks and Naomi's contracts are not expiring at the same time. That is not something that is accurate, despite it being reported several times. Sasha Banks' contract does expire after Naomi's, but Naomi's is due very shortly. This is one of the main reasons that we had Naomi versus Sonya Deville as a feud, to encourage Naomi to continue and encourage Naomi to believe that they had big plans for her. Firstly, before we go into any further news, please remember to hit like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. The little thumbs up can make a massive difference to the growth of the channel and also gives us an opportunity to basically say, hi, we're here, I'm Tom Colohue and I'm trying to create the best news show we can find out there. Now, as regards the current situation, as regards the request for them to be there in person for SmackDown, this request has not been made since Monday. They were originally booked for SmackDown. The request came Saturday or Sunday earlier in the week. However, it looks like Sasha Banks and Naomi will not be there tonight. Being clear, the WWE wants them to be there. The WWE expects them to be there. But at this point in time, they are no-showing events. I'm just going to quickly tweet that the show is live. The latest updates on both Sasha Banks and Naomi live now for spoiler warning. Join below. Easy enough. So regarding the future of Sasha Banks and Naomi, this is a difficult one to state. This is something that has, as you might expect, wound up a lot of people in the WWE. Vince McMahon is not best pleased with the situation, and that's just exactly as you'd expect. There are rumours of producers shouting at the women backstage, and there is definitely some truth to this. There is at least one producer that I haven't had a name of, but there is at least one producer who has just laid into them both when they requested a meeting with Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon himself is said to be open to speaking with Sasha Banks and Naomi and hopes this can all get sorted out. However, Vince McMahon is not the driving force behind whatever decision they will be as to the future of Sasha Banks and Naomi. That decision will land with Nick Khan. Nick Khan, of course, who is in charge of the keep and release lists that have been circulating over the last few years and will determine who the WWE fires and who the WWE keeps. Sasha Banks and Naomi are not two people that the WWE want to let go. The primary reason for this is that they don't want to hand such high-level talent and high-level drawing potential to the opposition. When I first mentioned this on Twitter a couple of days ago, Sasha Banks is brighter than Naomi. This is not necessarily the case. Naomi does have a very, very strong support. She just hasn't had the same level of success, so that level of support is a little bit less vocal. Both women are extremely popular backstage. Reports that Sasha Banks is hated backstage, simply untrue. She is not hated in any way, shape or form. A large part of the locker room does have Sasha Banks and Naomi's back. However, they are not able to vocally support their fellow talent. The WWE's expectation is that at the end of this, The two sides, that being the WWE and the current Women's Tag Team Champions, will meet in the middle. However, the WWE went in all guns blazing. The decision to release the statement in question came directly from Nick Khan himself. He is the one who decided they would get ahead of the story and get ahead of it. They have. In their own manner, Sasha Banks and Naomi have not actually vocalized anything as regards their opinions on this, so there is of course a lot of upset involved in every direction at the moment. Mikaze, Sasha Banks' husband, has made it clear that not everything that's been said is true. Meanwhile, we're getting names that are known to rile things up, such as Corey Graves, who mentioned this on air, saying we'll have to wait and see. Booker T, who is known to basically say whatever the hell he wants with no regard for anyone involved, saying we'll have to wait and see. And even myself on the video on Wednesday, I did make it clear I was waiting for a statement of some sort from Sasha Banks and Naomi. However, it is not guaranteed that they will be permitted to make that statement. The WWE are trying to reach out to Sasha Banks and Naomi at the moment about coming back in. The idea that their contracts will expire before they come back into a WWE ring is false. The WWE's intention is to freeze their contracts, and as I've stated, the idea that both of their contracts will expire randomly within the next 2 months is simply not true. Simply not true. They may be released if the WWE comes to an agreement. Naomi's contract does end before Sasha's. Now, as I have said, just to be clear and clarify on this one, Sasha Banks and Naomi have been told that they are expected to be at SmackDown. If they are not at SmackDown, then they have chosen not to show for the event, pending WWE agreement of time off. If they've agreed on time off, I would expect that we will get another statement shortly. At this point in time, no show seems the most likely scenario. This is an Ask Me Anything stream. As always, please start asking questions, and I will be doing a little bit of a true or false. Any particular reports about this that have come in, let me know what you'd like me to discuss, and I will tell you whether the information in that report has been proven true or false thus far. I will catch up with some of the questions and then speak a little bit more about this, because there is still a little bit more to discuss as per the plans for Sasha Banks and Naomi going forwards. Bailey Welcome says, hello Tom, another quiet week in wrestling, huh? Yeah, absolutely dead. I always love these weeks where I think, oh, I'll be able to relax and take a little time, and then something big happens. Spider-Boss says, hello Tom, any update on Sasha and Naomi? The entire stream will essentially be dedicated to that. Spider-Boss says, according to Ringside News, Sasha and Naomi were pulled off from live events, but that was denied by Sasha's husband on Twitter. Right, this report came from Brad Shepard and was redistributed by Ringside News, who seemingly are trying to make him a big deal again. To my knowledge, Sasha Banks and Naomi have not been pulled from any live events whatsoever. In fact, the WWE has not pulled any of their dates, and instead has made it clear that they expect to see the women back in action as soon as possible. Jermaine says, hi Tom. Hello Jermaine, how are you? And Noob says, hello Tom, how are you doing today? Doing very, very well, thank you. Always appreciate that there's always a few people asking just how I am. A lot of people come here just for the wrestling news, but it's nice to know as well that there are people who care genuinely. Thank you. Jimmy Wrestling says, hello Tom. Hello Jimmy. And Jaden says, hey Tom. Hello Jaden as well. If you have just started watching and you're watching on YouTube, please remember to hit that thumbs up. That like button can make a massive difference to the growth of this channel. As per the beginning of this show, we were on 1,132 subscribers. 1,132 subscribers. If we can continue to grow at that rate, we will be at a very, very good position and making plenty of money from the ads in due time. Simon says, hey Tom, Sasha is with Snoop Dogg's son Prince in Minneapolis, Minnesota with his rapper cousin Chris Broad. Simon, what is your source for that? Can you let us know your source? If your source is somebody telling PW Insider, which by the way, PW Insider made it clear that it was one source who they had not vetted, saying that she was on a plane to Minneapolis, I don't trust that one. Hypnosis Pro says, I have so many questions, honestly, so bear with me as I ask all of them. First of all, why are there so many conflicting reports about this situation? Well, the main reason for that is that there are very, very few people who have any trustworthy information, any trustworthy information as regards Sasha Banks. Very few people who've been able to share any reports as per Sasha Banks. She does not speak with journalists. That's just not something that she does. Those few that do, including myself, who've had a good record with Sasha Banks in the past, those are the ones worth listening to in that one. But there are lots of reports out there that just don't add anything to the conversation and essentially are people trying to hedge their bets and say something like, oh, Sasha Banks won't be on TV for months now. They're guessing. They're just guessing. Jaden says Sasha's husband broke silence on Twitter. He did, but all he really said was there's a lot of misinformation out there. We are still waiting on a formal statement, or at least something a little more substantial. Spider-Boss says, did Kevin Dunn yell at Sasha and Naomi on Monday? Very unlikely. Kevin Dunn does not work directly with talent, and that's certainly not something I've ever heard. Simon says, hey Tom, with all the rumours of Sasha's contract today, when does it actually expire? Originally coming from TNA Impact legend Frankie Kazarian's podcast. That's not the most reliable source as well, to be completely honest. As regards Sasha Banks' contract, I don't know. And I don't think anyone else does either. It's certainly not the longest contract in the world, and there were reports that she signed a 3-year contract many Junes ago. However, we cannot sit here and say that that's definite. We can't. We'll wait and see how that goes. Hypnosis Bro says, are they really no-showing events? If so, can't WWE freeze their contracts? To be blunt, if there has been a discussion with the WWE that allows them not to appear tonight, then that will have happened in the last few hours. However, to my knowledge, that has not happened as of yet. Sean says, hello Tom. Hello Sean. And to be blunt, as regards freezing their contracts, given that they are not employees, the WWE can freeze their contracts for basically anything. Jaden says, are you going to do a SmackDown watch-along? I am going to do a SmackDown watch-along. We will be doing a watch party. We have a new overlay just for the occasion. It's similar to the one that we had in the blue, but it is not quite the same. Spider-Boss says, is it true that Vince is trying to reach Sasha and Naomi to talk with them? Yes, that is true. Vince McMahon, the WWE by and large, are trying to reach out and connect directly with Sasha Banks and Naomi. I don't know how successful that has been. But we're waiting for more information on that one. Douglas Bino says, the future of the women's tag titles, are they retired? And this is something I definitely wanted to talk about. Thank you very much, Douglas, for raising this question. The women's tag team championships were created, and I reported shortly afterwards that they were created with no actual plan. And this has been borne out and re-reported by a number of different sites. But if you even just type it into Google, you'll see that the original source was yours truly. As regards these championships, Sasha Banks and Bayley went to hell and back, to make them happen. Vince McMahon, WWE Creative, have never had any plans for them. The only reason they've been featured recently is proximity to WrestleMania, where there was lots of slots for matches, and because Sasha Banks took it upon herself to get them featured as much as possible. As regards the tag team titles now, where we are looking at the women's roster, if Sasha Banks and Naomi are not involved, there is no point having the titles, because there's not enough women to actually feature it regularly week in and week out. And to be fair, it's not like they've been featuring them regularly week in and week out anyway. What I suspect the WWE would do, and what I would recommend, is just making the NXT women's tag team titles a multi-brand affair, so that the NXT tag team champions can go wherever they damn well please, and we can have some top-level talents like Sasha Banks and Naomi popping down to NXT more often. Simon says, who is Ronda going to face now at Hell in a Cell? Sasha is not there. Well, at the moment, there is no formal plan. They are hoping that Sasha will return. They're hoping that Naomi will return, but of course, Naomi is no longer needed for the program with Bianca Belair. As regards Ronda Rousey, she's unlikely to feature if Sasha Banks doesn't return. That said, they do have Shayna Baszler and Natalya waiting in the wings. I don't think that would particularly help the audience. I don't think the crowds would be really behind that, but it would still be a match. Hypnosis Bro says they're definitely bringing Bayley back sooner now since Ronda has no opponent. That is also a possibility, of course. There is no reason not to do that. Bayley has been cleared to wrestle. They're just waiting for the right storyline, or, I suspect, the right moment. She is expected to feature for Money in the Bank, and by that, of course, I mean in the Money in the Bank ladder match. So I would wait to see what happens there, but it's certainly a possibility that she is rushed back. Nelson says, do you think WWE, Sasha and Naomi will work things out or no? I think they will. After all, any previous issues that people have had, particularly Sasha, have been ironed out by Vince McMahon directly. As I say, the difference now is that Vince McMahon is not directly overseeing it. Nick Khan is directly overseeing it. Jaden says, there is a statement released by someone close to Naomi. Is it trustworthy? To my knowledge, the person who released the Twitter thread as regards Naomi's situation is trustworthy. That is, to my knowledge, the vetting that I have done have cleared this person as close enough to be trustworthy. However, we do not know for a fact that those words come directly from Naomi. It may be an interpretation. I would wait for a second source. And it is disagreed with and disputed by a number of people, unfortunately. Noob says, according to Dave Meltzer, that Becky Lynch pitched the idea for Asuka to beat Becky on Monday Night Raw due to the Sasha Banks and Naomi walk-off. Dave Meltzer is saying a lot of things, not all of which are true, to be very blunt there. It is not unlikely that Becky Lynch did that. Becky Lynch has been overdue a few losses to Asuka, and she's been asking to lose to Asuka for a while. Thank you for clarifying the source there, Simon, the Instagram. Thank you kindly. Welcome, Conrad. How you doing, mate? Great to see you. Jaden says, I subscribe to your gaming channel with 11 accounts. Bloody hell, mate. Bloody hell, I didn't know you had 11 accounts. Thank you kindly. Jaden says, why did Sasha unfollow Bayley on Twitter? No idea. I'm not aware of there being any issue between Bayley and Sasha Banks. Just want to be clear there. I'm not aware of any issue between the two. Sasha basically just unfollowed everyone. Hypnosis Bro says, was it unprofessional or did WWE lie about it? Because conflicting reports say they left during the show, while others say they left before the show. Which is it? It was during the show. I can state categorically, Sasha Banks and Naomi left during Monday Night Raw. They left when the show was already live. Any reports stating that they left before the show are incorrect. They are simply incorrect. Spider-Boss says, did Sasha and Naomi argue with John Laurinaitis? I'm not aware of any argument with John Laurinaitis. To my knowledge, John Laurinaitis simply received the belts, asked what was going on, and was told we're leaving. Dominic Perez says, hi Tom. Have they decided on the world title? Is one going back to Raw? Sorry for the same question, thank you. No worries, mate. No worries whatsoever. As regards the world title, they have not decided. They are still essentially making it up as they go along, but I do believe it will be treated as two separate belts. As you know, in the February, I did state that the two belts would be kept separately and won by Roman Reigns. At this point, nothing further has actually been decided as regards it, though, as I've said, I don't expect we're going to see the Tag Team Championships unified tonight. Jaden says, I don't get why the WWE released a statement. They should have stayed quiet like they did with Charlotte. Certainly this escalated a lot faster than I expected. I can say that for certain. When it comes to the championships being set out, that was certainly one way to do it. But the WWE are trying to cover the main event being dropped, the false advertising. They're trying to get ahead of it with sponsors. The Charlotte Flair situation was entirely different because they had 4 weeks. They had 4 weeks until an actual wrestling match. Whereas during Raw, they had the rest of Raw before the wrestling match. Spider-Boss says, I wonder what Vince can offer to Sasha and Naomi for them to return to WWE. I tell you what he could offer. A match at Hell in a Cell for the Women's Tag Team Championships against Nikki Cross and Doudrop. That is what Sasha Banks and Naomi want. They already have a different challenger for Bianca Belair. They could easily find a different challenger for Ronda Rousey. What Sasha Banks and Naomi want is a match at Hell in a Cell for the Women's Tag Team Championships against Nikki Cross and Doudrop. They want that championship division to be treated with a lot more respect than it has been. They want proof of a plan, and if they don't get it, there is no point talking about them being there. Jaden asks, what side are you on, Sasha or Sasha or WWE. I maintain that I am choosing to be on neither side. As a journalist, it's important that I stay separate from this. I can see reasons on both sides for this to happen. I am not willing to make a statement at this time. Hector, welcome. Says, happy Friday, Tom. What did you think of Stephanie taking a leave of absence and Nick Khan would take some of her responsibility while she's gone? Thoughts? Well, when it comes to taking the responsibility, it shows that the chief brand officer is not that intensive a role. I'll say that. I will absolutely say that. And I think it's very much fair to say that, given that Nick Khan is taking it on while still being president of the WWE. As you guys will know from my analysis of Nick Khan's role, I was the first one to really speak about the release lists that he was putting together. I was the first one to really go in depth about the cost-benefit analysis system that he uses, and I was the first one to report that he was now the president of the WWE and heir apparent. So when it comes to Nick Khan, he will be taking over Stephanie McMahon's responsibilities, not solely. There will be other people who also take on some of her responsibilities, but Nick Khan essentially going forwards will be in charge of the brand, in charge of presentation of the WWE, which is not really that different to what he's doing already. As regards Stephanie taking a leave of absence, she's worked non-stop pretty much every day for the past 20 years. I'm okay with her taking a bit of a break. Just a bit of a break, especially considering everything that's happening in and around her and the company at the moment. Now is an ideal time to step back and just take a breather. Simon says, there is a lot of other reports saying Sasha and Naomi left hours before the show. Why advertise a match that was never going to happen in the first place at the start of Raw if they weren't there? They were there at the start of Raw. They left during Monday Night Raw. I've not seen any of these reports that you're referring to, but they are categorically incorrect. Sasha Banks and Naomi left during Monday Night Raw. Full Miner says, how do you see things going for the women's tag team division after this? Well, they're down to one tag team, that being Nikki Cross and Doudrop, but to be fair, the only reason Nikki Cross and Doudrop were made into a tag team is because Sasha Banks and Naomi were trying desperately to make that happen. Sasha Banks and Naomi were basically fighting their corner and trying to get more tag teams involved. The reason we saw Natalya and Shayna Baszler involved was because of Sasha Banks and Naomi going to Vince McMahon saying, we need new tag teams, give us new tag teams. If you don't give us new tag teams, we will walk. That is exactly what ended up happening. So with no Sasha Banks and Naomi, I don't expect we're going to see Nikki Cross or Doudrop on TV all that much. I don't think we'll see the tag division. I don't think we'll see the tag championships, possibly again. We have to consider the possibility that they're going to throw the whole thing away now. Ethan says, hey Tom, hey Ethan, how you doing, mate? Noob says, your thoughts on Stephanie McMahon taking a leave of absence. I believe I've discussed that one. And Simon says, Bailey, Natty, Shayna, Jimmy Uso, Mikazi. I know who Mikazi is. Xavier Woods, Mickey James, Britt Baker, Swerve, CM Punk, Big Swole, Mia Yim all showed support for Sasha and Naomi. There are plenty more who support them. The reports of Sasha Banks was hated backstage, I can categorically state untrue. Sasha Banks is popular backstage, but she does move in her own circles, as I mentioned about different people as well. She's popular with people that she spends time with, basically. Just as an aside to that, the amount of people I've seen attacking Alexa Bliss for absolutely no reason whatsoever is utterly ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous, particularly for someone who is not involved whatsoever in this situation. As I say, there are many people in the WWE who want to be even more supportive, but they are unable to do so for fear of losing their jobs. I'm never happy to say that, but I have to state it because it is a fact. Hypnosis Bro says, I respect Sasha and Naomi for standing up for what they believe in, but walking off during the show, that's really unprofessional, but still I'm with Sasha and Naomi. If that changes your mind, that changes your mind. It's really, for them at least, from the voices coming out and the reports that I've seen about this, they felt like it was the last straw. They felt like they had no other choice. They felt like they'd been ignored one time too many. Spider-Boss says this whole situation of Sasha and Naomi, WWE could have handled behind closed doors. They absolutely could have. And in my opinion, they should have. regardless of any other opinion I have here, this is not front of house stuff. It's not. That said, the WWE's intention was not even necessarily to attack Sasha Banks and Naomi. It was to get there first, to get their report out first, so the big mainstream news outlets shared their version of events and not the version of events from Sasha Banks and Naomi. Of course, Sasha Banks and Naomi did read that statement and found out when reading it that they apparently had issue with two of the workers there. Apparently they had issue with two of the workers there. This was, to be blunt, news to them. If you've just started watching on YouTube, please do remember that you can hit that thumbs up and give me a like. We are currently at 20 likes. If we can get 5 more, that would be a lovely record for the first 30 minutes of a show. We continue to grow and develop mostly because of the support that you guys give me. I'm not even asking when it comes to financial in that regard. I very much appreciate people on Twitch who offer financial support in that regard. YouTube, we will be monetized again shortly. We're just going through a bit of a tax thing at the moment, at which point, again, would be very grateful of that. But when it comes to ads, when it comes to likes, when it comes to growth, the reason we are growing as quickly as we are, and we're currently at 1,132 subscribers, is the amount of love that we are getting from everyone who does join these shows, chat away, hit like, subscribe if you haven't, of course. We are currently at 55 viewers. Our record, by the way, 57. So we are 3 away from a new record. Bailey says, one of the results of this when it's settled is the WWE has to get out of the same day booking business. This doesn't happen if talent knows what's ahead of them days or weeks in advance, not hours. I think that's very fair, Bailey. I think that's a very fair comment. The WWE have for many years now been booking basically everything on the fly, and it does create problems. Talent arrive, they get the script with only a couple of hours beforehand to work things out, and before you know it, we have issues like this, where people are just very unhappy with the situation. We gained 4 likes from my request there, and we've broken our record, 59 concurrent viewers, 60 concurrent viewers on the YouTube side, a brand new record. When I say to you, please hit like on the video, it does affect viewership, literally showing it right now. Simon says, I'm pro-worker, not company. I will always support and stand with Sasha and Naomi, and you are of course welcome to do that. Spiderboss says, I hope the situation of Sasha and Naomi ends well to see them back on Smackdown. I suspect we will see them back before their contracts expire, or before their contracts are rumoured to expire. I suspect we'll see them in and around Money in the Bank time. I expect the WWE to fold. I'm going to be really blunt here. In these situations, typically it is the company that folds and gives the workers whatever they request. The WWE really, genuinely cannot afford to lose people of the potential, drawing power and popularity of Sasha Banks and Naomi. Now, I've seen a lot of different reports stating, oh, but what about Roman Reigns? And I'm going to be really clear here. Reporters saying, oh, if Roman Reigns gets involved, Naomi will be fine, are sexist as hell. Roman Reigns, quite literally, has nothing to do with this, and I just want to make that clear. Sean says, did you see that Roman, Mandy and Alexa got a lot of heat for speaking about Stephanie by the crew? Yes, but basically anyone who is positive in the WWE is going to get a lot of hate from the crew at this moment in time, because I think I've mentioned this before. As regards to the crew, they are militant as hell. A lot of people will be staying out of this. They'll be on the fence. That's not the worst thing in the world. It's not a crime to not commit, as it were. It's not a crime to protect your job. It's not a crime to say something positive about someone else. It's not a crime to be quiet while you're waiting for more information. Roman Reigns, Mandy Rose and Alexa Bliss might not have spoken to Sasha Banks and Naomi. They may move in different circles. There is no reason that they would know more. No reason whatsoever. But fandom, the stan fandom that we have, the crew as a concept, are out for blood unless everyone says what they want them to say. To be clear, that's not all of the crew. As you guys know, I count myself as a member of the crew, as it were. I'm a Sasha Banks fan, but I ain't that militant. Hypnosis Bro says also, was the tag titles not being defended at Hell in a Cell the straw that broke their backs? I mean, getting a world title match at a pay-per-view while being tag champion is pretty good, no? I thought so. I thought that actually elevated the championships myself, but I'm not a wrestler. I'm not in that locker room. I don't know what else may have happened because, as I mentioned, this escalated real quick. Like, seriously quickly, this became a huge deal. So I'm not willing to sit here and say one way or the other what's actually happened because I don't know. Dimitar says, hi Tom. Hello Dimitar. What did I miss? Bit of talk about Sasha Banks and Naomi, mate. Plenty to talk about. Simon says, got so much love, respect for Shayna. Amazing woman for showing her support for both Naomi and Sasha. She did indeed. She's a big fan of theirs. Jim Main says, I just don't see Nick Khan doing the cost analysis and feel that letting Sasha and Naomi go will be best for business. I believe they will be back in the WWE. See, there's an issue there, Jermaine, and there's a really simple issue. It's not actually down to Nick Khan. At the moment, it's down to Sasha Banks and Naomi whether they choose to return. If they choose to return, then Nick Khan could probably make a good deal of it. But I don't think he'd be willing to say, yeah, we don't need them. Because they do. Because they do need them. Spider-Boss says, fans attacked Carmella on Twitter all because Carmella defended Corey's comments on Raw. I don't feel that Sasha Banks and Naomi will be offended by Corey's comments on Raw from Corey. I don't think they'll be offended by Corey is what I meant to say there. I think they may be offended by the person telling Corey Graves to say that, which, by the way, was Vince McMahon. Sean says, the Observer says Sasha and Naomi's contracts are up soon and they believe Naomi will re-sign. Naomi's contract is up soon. Sasha Banks' contract, in as far as I'm aware, lasts a while longer yet. Just a little while longer. I, again, expect both will re-sign, but I think Sasha Banks is going to get some guarantees this time around. As regards the idea of Naomi re-signing, negotiations already started for Naomi. Negotiations are not already started for Sasha Banks. Simon says, is the 10-men tag team match a double or nothing between Jazz, the Beast, FCC, LAX, a blood and guts match? You've asked me that a few times, Simon. I still have absolutely no idea. Moxie says, acknowledge me. You are acknowledged, sir. You do on. JJ says, yeah, it was Sasha fans attacking her because she said something about Steph but not the situation. That's why a lot of people on Twitter don't like her fans. That will make people turn on Sasha. And that's something that people need to be more aware of. That will make people turn on Sasha. Hector says, Tom, at what point will WWE or any major wrestling company introduce unionization? What has to take place for this to happen, if ever? I've spoken about this in the past, but I appreciate you bringing this up because I've got a lot to say about this. I support unionization. I support the idea of wrestlers being part of the Screen Actors Guild. They are actors. That is a fact. And I think that's a wonderful choice for wrestlers. For the WWE to introduce unionization, when you say at what point, never. The WWE will never introduce unionization because that would give their employees power. Also, it would give their employees the ability to say, I'm an employee, which the WWE does not want to give. They would rather just refer to them as anything else because employees have rights. And the WWE are not wanting to make that a situation. As regards how to get unionization into the WWE, it's actually very simple. What it takes is a talent so good that the WWE will ignore the fact that they are a part of a union and still sign them. That is what it takes to introduce unionization to the WWE. You need someone the level of, for example, a Sasha Banks to be unionized and to say to the WWE, yeah, I'm not leaving the union. If you want me, pay up. That's what it takes. Dimitar says that statement by WWE was huge BS, especially the thing with them not being comfortable with the workers. Yeah, they were surprised too. When they read the statement, that is when they also found out that they apparently had an issue with some of the workers. Jermaine says, I don't understand why people were attacking Alexa Bliss and any other talent because they didn't come and support Sasha and Naomi. They can't say anything openly because they're currently still there. Pardon me. My reports have been clear on this. Every report I've made has mentioned that WWE talent are supportive of Sasha Banks and Naomi. However, they are not able to do so vocally for fear of losing their jobs, because as I've mentioned, WWE wrestlers are not employees. If the WWE wants to fire them, all they have to do is say the word. KJ says, what's up, Tom? I'm late. Welcome, KJ. Great to see you. Dimitar says they've been in the ring countless times with Asuka and Becky, and they've worked with Nikki and Doudrop before. They have. They absolutely have. And it's completely unnecessary. There was no need for that comment in the statement. Simon says, Tony Khan watching on the Fulham transfer budget, ready to spend especially very big on Sasha, also Naomi. Sasha and Naomi, mate. Come on, you can do better than that. You don't need to devalue one person. KJ says, I was trying to put together a Hell in a Cell match card, and since Banks is out, maybe Shayna would be the next best option. I do suspect that is the most likely scenario at this point. Sean says, was it true the producers were yelling at Sasha and Naomi? Was one of the producers Molly Holly? I'm not aware of any names as regards producers or producer who shouted at Sasha Banks and Naomi. All I've been told is that someone was shouting at them in front of other people. Simon says, any updates on Moxie's contract, Daniel Bryan's possible injury? Daniel Bryan is okay. He does need to rest it a little bit. He may miss a couple of weeks, but he's basically okay. As regards John Moxley's contract, I'm still not personally aware of a new contract or a new deal being signed. I did laugh at the report from the Wrestling Observer, which was carried far and wide, which said, yeah, John Moxley's probably signed something, I don't know. Wrestling sites far and wide took that and ran with it. They took that and ran with it. Of course, 3 days ago, I was the first one to say on Twitter the WWE do not want to suspend or fire Sasha Banks and Naomi because they were worried about giving them to the competition. Yesterday, a report came from Wrestling Observer saying the exact same thing, and suddenly it was everywhere. Sucks. Dimitar says, is the thing about their contracts true? With Naomi, yes. With Sasha, not quite. Sai, welcome. Says, such a weird conundrum. I'm always pro-worker too, especially with WWE, and their creative should be protested at times, but not by walking out. Their fans lose out their big no-no for me. We're, of course, all entitled to our opinions. I'm staying out of this one, because as a journalist, I do need to keep a certain level of distance. But the fans definitely did lose out. Jermaine says, I believe WWE are going to do a lot of kissing Sasha and Naomi's asses to get them back because of the WWE statement that they wanted to get out and the false promises and reneging on promises to them. You say that, and I understand what you're saying there, but if that were true, would they have released that report in the first place? I have questions. Big questions. JJ says people are attacking Becky, Charlotte, even Seth. Yeah, people are attacking anyone that moved. And Sean says, the crew also calls people racist if they don't show support. I have seen some of that. Dimitar says, every fandom did it. I saw Charlotte fans attacking Sasha, Naomi, and even Becky. Yeah, people really need to chill the hell out. They really do. The amount of people in hashtag the crew, as it were, who are just going nuts. Absolutely nuts. And Alexa Bliss has been their favourite target for a long time, despite having no involvement whatsoever. Absolutely ridiculous. Hypnosis Bro says, I do have one important question. If Sasha and Naomi are upset about the tag division and the booking of the titles after they walked out, will they retire the titles, and what happens if they do? This is a hard one to answer, but honestly, at the very least, the titles are gonna vanish for a while, because who else is there? They can't have a feud. There are no tag teams. They've got Nikki Cross and Doudrop, who certainly suggestions are that was a Sasha Banks Naomi push to get them involved and get them more on TV. So that's the only tag team. So even if they gave them the championships, they'd have them and then they'd just vanish from TV. It really depends if Sasha Banks and Naomi come back. If they do, I can see the championships sticking around. If they don't, I don't see any reason to keep them. Hey Ronaldinho, how you doing, mate? Dimitar says every fan base has bad apples Very, very true. Some are more vocal than others naturally, but we are where we are. Moneymaker says, in this day and age, bashing two talented black women on national TV like WWE did on Monday, that's not a good look. To be blunt, bashing anyone the way that the WWE did is not a good look. Curse Wine says, first time hearing of this militant fan base, just incredible. It is amazing watching it unfold, largely on Twitter. But if you've ever been to, for example, a WWE show, let's say a live taping of a Raw and Smackdown in Manchester at some time, and seen Daniel Bryan walk past a huge crowd and nobody reacting, then seen Sasha Banks walk past and the world goes ballistic. People genuinely love this woman and are more than willing to kill for it. Without instruction, to be clear. Dimitar says Sasha was seen with her cousin, so at least she looked happy. She's busy. That's always a good thing, to be fair. Bailey says Sasha Banks is either the number 1 or number 2 most bankable star in the WWE right now. With WrestleMania headed for Hollywood, I think Vince and Nick Khan understand the need to get this settled. To be clear, and I really need to ask a question about this. The WWE being in Hollywood doesn't mean they want wrestlers who've been in films or TV shows. It actually makes no difference whatsoever. The location is completely secondary to the fact that they're on TV. They're global. They're everywhere. They're not worried about taking particular, this person's got a better link to Hollywood. They have no interest in that whatsoever. They don't care. They do not care at all as regards Hollywood and WrestleMania, as it were. That said, I'm sure Nick Khan does want to get this settled because, even just to break it down into the brass tacks, they are some very valuable commodities to the WWE. Spiderboss says, what's your opinion about Jericho's promo bringing Regal's personal problems? Jericho has a history of that and a habit of that. Don't know, with CM Punk previously, for example. There's just something that he does. It's not something I'm particularly a fan of when it comes to vices, but I can't imagine that he didn't clear it. Jericho doesn't seem to be the guy that he was when he first started in WWE, and he was just saying things and insulting people. Michael says, your gut feeling, how long does this drag on? Weeks or months? My gut feeling is that if they are back, they will be back by SummerSlam, possibly as early as Money in the Bank, but they may take a little time to work things out. Sean says, if they are not employees, how can they be fired? Well, it's actually really easy. When it comes to the employee thing, because they're not employees, they just have to stop hiring them. They just literally have to stop calling them up and saying, you're booked. And that's it. No severance, no nothing. They're basically 0-hour contract. Joey says, are all creative plans for Sasha and Naomi on hold until this is resolved? Yes. They were booked for SmackDown this week. It sounds like they are not there. So we ain't going to be seeing them. As regards creative plans, the creative team have a couple of things in their back pocket, but they don't have anything formal and ready to go for Sasha Banks and Naomi. Hypnosis Bro says, I honestly want to be the fly on the wall in Gorilla when Vince found out Sasha and Naomi walked off, but Vince's temperature went from 0 to 100 quick. To say it as simply as possible, yeah, he was not happy. There are minor reports about that, but I think the biggest giveaway that he was not happy is what he told Corey Graves to say. James Stewart says, are most superstars technically self-employed but obligated? Yes, that's a very good description of the situation. They are technically self-employed, they get invoiced as it were, but they're told we'll give you this much per year. Basically, none of it actually makes sense. None of it actually makes any sense whatsoever. But the WWE get away with it because nobody does anything. I think that's the word. Spiderboss says, some of Sasha's crew got mad at me because I told them don't buy nothing that comes from Wrestling Observer. Yeah, in my experience of the crew, they believe pro-Sasha stuff. They don't believe anti-Sasha stuff. Sean says, do you believe that Naomi was going to win the six-pack challenge? And was she going to pin Sasha? I know Fightful said Naomi was supposed to pin Nikki Ash. She was originally supposed to pin Sasha. This was changed after an initial meeting before the show to Naomi pinning Nikki Ash and the tag team partners not actually fighting each other, though there was a planned tease of a match between Naomi and Sasha. Of course, as we've been discussing, that match was going to be happening at some point this year. Probably not now. Ghost says, to me, WWE's statement was entirely unnecessary and in a way backfired against them, as I saw even more people supporting Sasha and Naomi as a result. Also, with the crew, the hate for other superstars that didn't publicly make a statement in support is simply bullying. I agree with that entirely. No one knows who has reached out to either of them, and honestly, this situation is none of our business to begin with. That's true. If the report hadn't come out from PW Insider stating that Sasha Banks and Naomi had left during Raw, if that report hadn't come out, would we even know? It wouldn't even be any of our business. I've said before, there was a time when Sasha Banks was at SmackDown and was booked for SmackDown, but ended up leaving in the middle of the show. I've mentioned that before, during SmackDown, not long after the Royal Rumble. Didn't make big news. It really didn't. Sean suggests calling up Katana and Kaden from NXT. I do think the best bet for the Tag Team Championships at the moment, literally the easiest thing to do, is just to make the NXT Women's Tag Team Championships the company Tag Team Championships. Timitar says, wouldn't retiring the titles get Sasha and Naomi even madder? That's one of the reasons I believe they will only do it if Sasha Banks and Naomi are not returning. Bro says, I wonder how Becky, Asuka, Doudrop and Nikki felt about this situation as they had to revert to a singles match. I'd imagine quite bummed out, but it really depends on individuals. Like, I know they were in the Four Horsewomen, but Becky and Sasha are not technically the closest of friends, as it were. To be clear, that is not me suggesting they don't like each other. That's me suggesting they're not the closest, joined at the hip sort of friends that, for example, Sasha and Bayley are. So I'd imagine they tried to reach out, but we'll see how that played out. JJ says, Ringside News reported Becky pitched to lose to Asuka Monday. Do you see them still adding her to the Hell in a Cell match, or just Bianca and Asuka? I think it'll just be Bianca and Asuka, to be completely honest. I'll wait and see how it actually plays out. But Becky Lynch, as we know, and as I've mentioned many times, has been pitching to have a few losses to Asuka for a while. She's been in constant feuds with Asuka because that's what Becky Lynch wants. And Becky Lynch, as we know, and as I've mentioned previously, after losing the championship at WrestleMania, is going to be going on a bit of a long-term losing tour. She wants to lose to a lot of different people, including, for example, Liv Morgan. Moment will come. Bailey says, the crew is wrestling's version of the fans that go to war for Taylor Swift or Beyonce. You are not wrong there. Curse Wine says, I'd non-lethally kill for my boy D-Bry. You non-lethally kill. I like that. To be fair, you saw him, I didn't. If you're currently watching on YouTube, please do remember to hit that thumbs up button. That little like can make a massive difference to the growth of the channel. We're currently at 31 likes, which is pretty damn good, considering we have 54 people watching right now. Now, if we're able to round that up and get to a point where we have 54 likes with 54 viewers, we will probably be on about 70 viewers. At which point I can ask those extra 16 viewers to give us some likes. So please do consider hitting like if you haven't already, and subscribe if you haven't also. Hector says, I apologise if you've talked about this in the past, but does shareholders' opinion matter to Vince when things like this happen? I feel like they can't be happy when things like this happen. Yes, it does. Vince does listen to the shareholders. He doesn't necessarily listen to wrestling fans on the internet, as he's been very open about. But when it comes to the shareholders, they do have a strong influence. If people are going to start selling WWE stock, Vince wants to know about it so he can right the ship. It was shareholder opinion that made the WWE blame Baron Corbin for bad WWE way back when. Sean says, do you think Indy Hartwell beats Mandy Rose on NXT? I do not. I think at the minute they're struggling for something for Indy Hartwell to do after basically dumping her storyline and then just giving her a match before giving her some tryouts and maybe bringing her up. JJ says, I was thinking probably SummerSlam if Bianca's not facing Rhea yet. It may be that that's when we get the rematch with Becky Lynch, to be fair. That may be rematch city. That certainly is a suggestion coming out of Wrestling Observer. Demetar says, Meltzer said that the thread by Naomi's apparent close friend is believed to be their side of the story, which included them leaving hours before the show. Once again, to my knowledge, they left during the show. As I said as well, the person in question is considered trustworthy from the vetting that different journalists and myself have been able to do, but it is still a slave to perspective. Joey says, did Bruce Pritchard have any involvement with them walking out? I'm not sure. I'm not aware of any involvement from Bruce Pritchard in that debacle. You've got to remember, a lot of the time, the producers that the talent actually spend time with are not the people in charge of anything. It's very difficult for the wrestlers to speak to the people who actually write their storylines. Moneymaker says, I never got the idea of having Sasha and Naomi putting over the singles champions at Hell in a Cell because I didn't get the tag titles there. Plenty of women you could have chosen from to face Ronda and Bianca. Yep, very much true. I'm little from column A, little from column B on it. It puts them in the spotlight, as it were, but I don't think either of them need that. Sasha doesn't need the Ronda rub. If anything, Ronda needs the Sasha rub, let's be honest. Spider Boss says, some of the crew is the most similar thing to crazy South American soccer fans. Okay, fair enough. We have some militant soccer fans over here in the UK, I tell you that. KSJ says, maybe it's just me, but I feel they should have never made tag titles, instead made another world title that could travel brands. I like the tag titles when they're used properly. I liked them how they were used initially. I liked having them pop up in NXT. I liked having them wrestle on both shows, but I would prefer them to feud at that side for 1 month, feud there for 1 month, feud there for 1 month, and be proper traveling. I'd also really like someone in NXT to win them and then pop up on Raw, pop up on SmackDown. They could be so much better, but they haven't been. Moneymaker says, Vince isn't going to win this with Sasha's connection in Hollywood. She doesn't need WWE as much as they need her. Once again, you're putting a lot of money in the Hollywood thing here. Also, when it comes to win this, it really depends what Sasha Banks wants. If she doesn't want to come back and wrestle, there is no winning this. Dementor says, why are we mentioning Ringside? It's the same site that reported that Charlotte has alienated people. It's also the same site, to be blunt, who reported that Sasha Banks is massively unpopular backstage, and that's not true either. Hypnosis Bro says, if Bianca versus Asuka is remaining a singles match, what is Becky doing? Her feud of Asuka just started, maybe Alexa, Sonya. I don't think I don't think Becky's going to be on this card. I think the loss to Asuka, the most likely situation would be she weasels her way into a triple threat. I think that's the most likely scenario if she is on the card. But personally, when it comes to Becky, I'd give her the night off on this one. And I would have no issue with that. Sometimes everyone needs a night off, and I feel if you're not going to let someone like Becky have a little time off, what's the point? She's been there every week. She's been doing all the live shows non-stop since SummerSlam, and as I have mentioned, she's on a limited date contract now too. You know? So she can afford to take a little time herself. We saw the first use of her limited date contract just after WrestleMania when she took a couple of weeks off. We will see her do this a few more times over the course of the year. I don't know how many dates she has, but she's not on a full-time contract. She's on a limited date one. Noob says, I'm hoping that Becky's final stop is going to be Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania 39. Wouldn't say final stop, but certainly the plan at the moment is Becky Lynch versus Ronda Rousey at next year's WrestleMania. Jace has only said ringside because he would prefer when you say where you've seen the story from. I do, and I appreciate you sourcing there, JJ. This is one of the best things about this chat, the fact that we do everything we can to source the information that we bring in. It really does make a big difference, and that, I feel, makes this the most well-informed chat in wrestling. We're sourcing all the information. We've got people like Megan who drop some pretty interesting stats, and it's just fun. You know, it's just fun. Sean says, what do you think is going to happen with Alexa next? Continue with Sonya or move on to something else? I would have her continue with Sonya for a little while longer, mostly because there's no one else for her really to feud with. So I'd have the Sonya Deville feud continue. I don't know how they can make that interesting, to be honest. Pardon me. Alexa's done everything right there, and I'm sure she is being rebuilt to go up against the big bad of Bianca Belair at some point soon, but we're not there yet. I would have her at this point continue with Sonya and then enter Money in the Bank next month. Hector says, Tom, what did you think of John Morrison being the Joker? I thought that was a little bit anticlimactic, but I think the reason it was anticlimactic is because when it comes to AEW and their big announcements, fans get really hyped up. And when it comes to AEW and their big announcements, the AEW social media team gets really hyped up and gets the wrong Johnny. So I like John Morrison. I think he could add a lot to the AEW roster. I think even just in terms of coaching. But I don't think he's as big a deal as anyone else, really. Sean says maybe they unify both women's tag titles. Could work, even temporarily. They could do exactly what they are doing right now with Roman. Dimitar says, I feel like Vince may have just caved in after being bothered by Bayley and Banks. That's the vibe I always got when it came to the women's tag team titles. When I was first talking about the fact that there was no plan when they were made, it was one of those where essentially the agenda was set by Sasha Banks and Bayley, and eventually Vince did just give in, gave them the championships and then said, all right, go and do something with them. They did. They did. But outside of that, nobody else did. Spider Boss is asking about Alexa Bliss. I believe I just covered that. Sean says, I do see Becky getting involved in the match at Hell in a Cell. If she's on the card, that's the ideal time for her. Curse Wine says, do you like Scotch eggs? How would you sauce them? I just like a Scotch egg, mate. It's way enough for me. Spider Boss says, I see Becky costing the match to Asuka at Hell in a Cell. Certainly it's an idea. I do feel like Asuka's not got a chance of beating Bianca Belair, so she either loses clean or Becky Lynch is there to provide the distraction. Now, obviously, if that's a triple threat, the distraction is automatic and Becky will take the pin. But I feel if that's not the case, the distraction from Becky makes the most sense. Curse One says, Ospreay Morrison, best match ever, never forget. The first time I went to live wrestling local to me, we did see Will Ospreay versus John Morrison, and it was absolutely amazing. The matches that followed, Christopher Daniels and Martin Kirby, were ruined. Just absolutely ruined by the fact that that match happened before it. Well, Sean, you're laughing at people, so I'm just going to go ahead and not read that. Hector says, Tom, this whole situation could have been avoided if we still had the anonymous Raw GM. Remember how great that was? No. Spider Boss says, what is next for Ronda's title reign? They don't know. They are still working that out. The plan looks like it was going to be Sasha. We knew there was going to be a Sasha Ronda match at some point soon. I think it's very early for the Sasha Ronda match. But there is still a hope that the match can go ahead. But I don't know how long that hope's going to be held. Megan says, if you would like a stat, then here's a possible one. Dave Meltzer has no clue what a cost of living crisis is, and then there is a pretty bad one in the UK given his remark over the fact that the Clash pre-sale didn't sell out. Also, hello, I hope everyone is doing well. I did see your tweets on that, Megan. Now, here's the thing. Dave Meltzer isn't really one for context, which is surprising given that Dave Meltzer really is one for context. Depends who he's talking about. But lately, I've got to say, on Twitter, context has become pointless. Which is why Brian Alvarez, for example, just says, this show, this rating. That's it. That's all he does. That's all he does. Because there's no point actually going into the context, going into the minutiae. Because people are just going to use that as a battering ram. The trick I found with Twitter, and the trick I found best on Twitter, is after you tweet something, just log out. Go and do something else. Don't bother with wondering about likes, retweets, quote tweets. Tweet your thing, just leave it. It's not real life. It doesn't matter. Sean says, the anonymous Raw GM, yeah, that was bad. Oh, it was. Spider-Boss says, I would love to see Trish as an authority figure on TV replacing Adam Pearce. I think they do pretty well with Adam Pearce, and it doesn't cost anywhere near as much as Trish Stratus would. We have just hit 11 p.m. right here in the UK. We will be live for a Smackdown watch party with, once again, a similar overlay to this. This is our spoiler warning blue overlay. We now have, thanks to Sai, a dedicated Smackdown watch-along overlay that you can look forward to. I will be launching the go live right after this show. But in the meantime, I just want to say a huge thanks to everyone for joining me today. We reached a new record of 60 concurrent viewers at once. 60 concurrent viewers at once is pretty special, I've got to be honest, considering we have 1,132 subscribers. Subscribe if you haven't already. Please remember to hit like. It makes a massive, massive difference, as you'll undoubtedly have seen over the course of this particular show. But until tonight's SmackDown watch party, I'm just going to say thank you very much. I've been Tom Colohue. You've been fantastic. I'll see you all very soon.